Today's video is going to focus on the summer yarn, the summer themed yarn that I dyed for the Traveling Seasons Afghan. Pretty sure I got that name right. I always want to call it Seasons Traveling Afghan, but I think it's Traveling Seasons Afghan. So, summer definitely gave me the most trouble out of all the colors, and I think it's funny because I'm pretty sure in the spring video I made a joke about having extra skeins in case the blue color gave me the most trouble. And I remember when I was going back and editing that part that I was thinking, wow, that was stupid. Why would blue, which is a primary color, give me such a hard time? I thought I would have more issues with the other colors, but no, the blue was the one that I struggled with the most. And that, I think, if I was going for like a darker blue, maybe I wouldn't have struggled so much. I don't know, I haven't dyed a dark blue yet, but because I was trying to go for a muted sky blue color, and the way that I mixed colors to kind of tone it down, that is where I ended up running into some issues. So at some point I'll be inserting clips of dyeing the yarn. I think I filmed I think at least 2 of them. I don't remember if I filmed all of the iterations, and I haven't quite figured out where in the video I want to insert that time lapse, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the process here. So this was my first round, and all of these are dyed with Kool-Aid. If you want more of a background, I would say watch the spring video, which I'll have in like the upper corner and in the description, so that you can kind of listen to my thought process on the whole project in general. But this is going to be specifically about my summer themed yarn. And so everything's dyed with Kool-Aid and food coloring. I'm using both to kind of narrow in on the color that I want. So for summer, I started with the blue raspberry. Pretty sure that's the flavor of Kool-Aid that I could just find at like my local grocery store. And that is specifically just blue food coloring. And so that is where I started. Blue raspberry lemonade is like a very pale blue, which, you know, not really surprising. It's a pale blue color, pretty bright, I'd say. So it was a good base for me, but I wanted to add a little more color, especially with 2 skeins and the amount of water I was doing. There is it wasn't very saturated with just 1 packet, but I used the packet to give me the base color as well as the citric acid for my color to bond to the yarn. So, I should also backtrack. The yarn that I'm using is Superwash Merino Wool. It's a worsted weight, and I bought a whole bunch of packs from Dyer Supplier, and that is one of the important components for dyeing with food coloring, is that you have to have an animal-based protein. I think I got that phrasing right. Chemnitz is where I learned everything I know about dyeing with food coloring, so I'll be sure to link her YouTube information below as well. So, wool yarn and food coloring, and then after I added my Kool-Aid, I knew that I needed to add more blue, so I added more blue, and I'm using a combination of just gel food coloring that I could find at a grocery store, and then I also found later on it's Wilton's food coloring, Wilton's color. I don't have it with me, but I'll put it in the description. Wilton's food coloring system, but it's like liquid color drops versus gel food coloring. So it's a little, I think it dissolves a little bit better in my water. So I'm using a little bit of both, just depending on each of the colors and what I need. So anyway, blue food coloring. And then I knew I needed to add a complementary color in order to tone down my blue, because I didn't want it to be vibrant. I wanted it to be more of like a grayish blue to help coordinate with my other colors. So I found out that if I mix those colors directly together in the pot, I end up not layering them. The colors actually mix, which makes complete sense, and I feel stupid for not making that connection to begin with, because the same happens with clay when I would mix colors. Like it's the same. So this ended up being too green because I put in a little bit of orange food coloring to try and tone back the blue, and in the process the yellow from orange mixed with the blue and gave me more of a teal. And I think it's showing up pretty accurately on camera. I would say that the camera is a little more saturated than it is in real life, so I would say this is about as muted as I was going for. Again, it's a little more saturated on the camera, but it was too green for me. So I know I messed that batch up. Still very pretty. I really like this color. It's just not what I wanted for this project. It's not the color I had in mind. So, too green, but I learned the lesson of I need to first heat set my blue and then layer on top with my color, because that's what I ended up doing with my spring color. It's just I didn't make that connection because I ended up doing 2 different dye batches. Anyway, I over-dyed my yellow with the complementary color because I didn't get to see how bright the yellow was until after my yarn was dried. So it just happened more organically that way, that I ended up over-dyeing after it heat set with my spring yarn, versus me trying to be like, oh, I can do this in 1 step instead of 2 steps, and too green. So attempt number 2. No, sorry, attempt number 1. Attempt number 2, jeez, is this one. where I pretty much, so I took notes in my notebook throughout the whole process of how many drops of what I did, because if I do need to dye more than one batch later on, I'll be able to recreate my color. But I didn't start with like my batch number 1 and then make adjustments. The only thing that I started the same with each batch that I'm going to show you is the 12 cups of water and 1 packet of Kool-Aid. That is my base for all 3 of them. And then from there, I experimented with the amount of food coloring of the different colors I used. And in some of these, I do end up dropping like red and purple in too, to try and like cool down. I guess red would warm it up, but I put in red to make blue, or to make the blue turn purple. So I was trying to cool down the blue a little bit too. This was attempt number 2. And again, I'd say it's a little more saturated on camera. It's very similar to this first batch, but it is not as green, and I don't know if this will show up. It kind of shows up. You can kind of see that this is definitely like more of like a sea foam coming through on camera, not in real life. It's more teal in real life. And then this is more blue. So, and I think these are probably the same. Nope, this is my second batch, ended up being a little darker. But this is definitely one where I used purple and or red, because I can see little places where I still have purple showing up. Like, I don't know if that's gonna show up, but there's some purple here. This is like it's actually a little darker of a blue than I was trying to go for, but it's muted and it's blue. There's a little bit of green, but it's not as noticeable. That was take 2. And I still thought it was too green, even though I heat set my blue, and then I went in with orange or red. I felt like it wasn't sky blue like I wanted. And it's not a sky blue. Again, it's pretty, just not what I pictured in my brain. So, take 3 then. I'm doing all of these in 2 skein batches, just so I can recreate it later on if I need to. This is attempt number 3. Again, I started with the same amount of water, 1 packet of Kool-Aid, and then readjusted my food coloring in the colors I used. This is definitely the bluest of them all. This is definitely the lightest of them all. I'll do a quick comparison between this is batch 2 and this is batch 3. So you can see this one's a little more vibrant, a little lighter, but it still is definitely toned it down. So that is definitely more sky blue, more of what I was thinking. There's still a little bit of green in it. It's just, I had such a hard time striking the line between bright blue and teal. Like, even if I only added a drop of orange food coloring, it seemed like it was still too bright. Even if it kept the blue at that point, it was still too bright. And for this one, I know for sure I didn't add a whole lot of orange, but I also really wanted to tone it down, and with it just happened to come the territory of slightly turning it green. So that is why I struggled with this color so much. I've now dyed all 4 colors, even though this is only the second video in the series. All 4 colors are now done, and every other color was super easy to get to the tone that I wanted. Like, it was just adding the complementary color, and I mean, I think my fall and winter colors were exactly what I wanted on the first try. I can't remember if I overdyed them, but I don't think I did. And my yellow was pretty close to what I wanted on my first try. The blue, it was such a struggle. And I'm recording this video today because I thought I had decided that blue number 2 was going to be the winner, which is this one. The darker, kind of still green, but at least more blue color, versus batch number 3, which is actually more along the lines of what I was picturing in my palette, more of a sky blue. But now I'm torn again because as I've been doing this video, like, yeah, this color is pretty much what I wanted. But when I compare the other 3 colors, this one I think fits in better with those. So I'll probably do some more comparisons and look at these 2. One is definitely out of the running. So this one that's a little more green. This one is out of the running and I will use it for something else. Not sure yet. But 2 and 3 are, I think, fairly equal contenders for this spot. I have a feeling I will end up going with 2 though, because outside of the yellow, I had all 4 of them together, and while yellow, my spring color, ends up sticking out a little bit because it is the lightest of them all, it just seemed like having the really light / slightly brighter blue with all 4 colors looked more off than having the more, it's not even teal, I'm not going to call it teal, but my batch number 2, the more muted, not really sky blue anymore, that color fit in better with the orange and purple that I have for my fall and winter colors. So I'm torn, but that's where I'm at. That is the journey. I learned a lot with my summer color. It's the one I dyed before fall and winter. I just dyed them in seasonal order. And I took what I learned with summer with me to fall and winter, and I think that helped me get those to where I wanted them to be in a faster manner. But like I said, I think there's something just with blue in general. I mean, blue is the color I struggled with the most with polymer clay too. I don't know a whole lot about color theory or I guess specifics to that nature, just what I've learned on my own journey. And blue was always the hardest color to manipulate, for me at least, with clay. And I don't know if that's just the color or if that's just me. But I guess if I think about that, I shouldn't have been surprised that it took me the most time and effort to get blue, but here we are. And I think I at least, between batch 2 and 3, I think I at least have a color that I feel confident in choosing between one of those. It's just a matter of which one I do end up using. And I'm filming this, it won't post till later, but I'm filming this at the end of March. So let's see, the day after tomorrow is when the first summer square releases. So I will need to get a move on and figure out which color I want to use. Maybe I'll end up caking one of each up and swatching it out or something and seeing which one I like better next to my spring squares. I thought it was interesting that while I was mixing it and I was filming my time lapse and everything, it was kind of cool using my camera on my phone to see which way my colors were leaning a little more heavily toward, especially with the blue. Even if my eyes hadn't registered yet that the orange was kind of shifting it to be green, during my first batch I realized as I was filming that the color looked much more green on camera than in person, and so I kind of started looking more closely at that relationship, I guess you could call it. And after my first batch because I messed up my first batch. I started using that with my other batches. I would just grab my phone and look at the pot of dye and yarn through my camera and see, okay, where's this shifting? And if I noticed that I was starting to be a little extra green, I would try to tone it back and color correct the other way. So I can't remember if I noticed the same kind of thing with my fall and winter colors. I think the orange kept pretty true on camera. The purple might have shifted more blue. But yeah, anyway, so I thought that was an interesting anecdote to add. That is where I will leave this video. I figured it was going to be a little longer than the others because my others went great and blue did not. So I wanted to share the experience, my kind of steps, and then the result. In conclusion, the final color out of the 3 different blues that I dyed ended up being attempt number 2. This was kind of the middle ground. Attempt number 1 was too green. I don't think it was too dark, it was just getting too teal. And then attempt number 3 ended up being too light, but I think if it would have been darker, it was very close between number 2 and number 3. Take 2 ended up being me dyeing the blue food coloring and the blue Kool-Aid first, and then completely heat setting everything just to kind of get that blue adhered to the yarn. And then once that was done, I came in with a bunch of different colors actually. I threw in some purple, some orange, and some red. Heat set that again, and then after I had that done, I felt like it still needed to be toned back a little more, so then I ended up over dyeing with orange food coloring and a tiny bit of blue and red. This experiment with the summer yarn definitely had me dyeing in kind of batches instead of knowing exactly what I was going to do and dyeing it in one go. I kind of accomplished a little, checked how the yarn was doing, and then came in with a second set of dyeing, heat set it, checked where it was going, and that's kind of what I did for all of the colors actually, but particularly with the summer color. Overall, I'm very happy with how this color ended up turning out. I think it's really pretty, and you can see my finished square here for the month of April square. And May's square actually just got released today because it's May 1st. So I'm excited to keep going with this summer color and see how the other squares work out.